My husband kissed me goodbye that morning like he always did, one hand on my jaw, thumb brushing my cheekbone, eyes already somewhere else. I didn't know then that it was the last normal kiss I would ever receive from him. I didn't know that by 3 o'clock that afternoon, my entire life, the Tribeca penthouse, the black Amex, the charity galas, the monogrammed everything, would be exposed as the most elaborate lie a man has ever told a woman who trusted him completely. But let me back up, because you need to understand who I was before I became who I am now. My name is Dakota Hargrove, and I was 36 years old, married to Reeve Hargrove, venture capitalist, Princeton man, the kind of handsome that belongs on a watch advertisement, living in a 4,000 square foot penthouse on Franklin Street in Lower Manhattan. We had a son, Cade, 7 years old, gap-toothed smile, obsessed with dinosaurs and oat milk pancakes, the single most perfect human being I have ever produced or encountered. I had left my career as a litigation attorney 5 years earlier because Reeves said it would be better for Kate, better for the family, better for us, and because I believed that a man who bought me a 5-carat cushion-cut diamond was a man who had my best interests at heart. That was my first mistake. It wasn't my last. That Tuesday in October started like every other Tuesday. Cade's backpack was by the door, his lunch was packed, turkey and avocado on sourdough because he had recently decided he was basically a foodie, his tablet, a kid's Amazon Fire with dinosaur stickers all over the case, was supposed to be right next to his backpack. Our building had a side-by-side entryway console, marble top, 2 drawers, and we kept both tablets there every night so Cade wouldn't lose his and Reeve could grab his work iPad on the way out. I had reminded myself 100 times that we needed a better system. I never fixed it. Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about disaster. It doesn't announce itself. It just walks in wearing your kid's dinosaur backpack. Cade was gone before I finished my second coffee. The nanny, Paloma, walked him to school at 7:45. I had a Pilates class at 9, a lunch with my friend Tessa at 12:30, and absolutely no reason to think the day would end with police officers and a room I never wanted to walk into. At 8:15, Reeve realized he'd left his work iPad on the console and texted me asking me to send it by courier to his Midtown office. I grabbed the tablet from the console without thinking. It wasn't until Paloma texted me at 10:52, "Mrs. Hargrove, Cade's teacher called me, said he brought the wrong tablet. She needs you to come in and pick it up personally. She said it's urgent," that I felt the first whisper of cold move through my chest. Not Reeve's iPad. Cade had taken Reeve's iPad. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe Reeve had something confidential on there, a sensitive deal, a client NDA, something that could embarrass him professionally if a second grader accidentally opened it during show and tell. I texted Reeve immediately. "Cade grabbed your work iPad by mistake. School is calling. I'm going now." He replied in 40 seconds, which was fast for him. He usually left me on red for hours with the single word, "Go." Not, "Oh no," or "Is he okay," or even a basic "thanks," just "go." I remember staring at that word on my screen and feeling something I couldn't name yet. I changed out of my Pilates clothes and called a car. I was 40 blocks away from the truth, and I had no idea. Kate's school was on the Upper West Side, Pemberton Academy. Private, prestigious, the kind of place where the lobby always smelled like fresh flowers and every teacher had a graduate degree and a gentle voice. I had toured 11 schools when Cade was 4. I had cried in the bathroom of 2 of them from the pressure of making the right choice. I thought about that as the car moved up the West Side Highway, the October sky flat and gray above the Hudson, the water dark and choppy. I thought about how much I had invested in building the right life. The right school, the right neighborhood, the right husband, the right everything. A life so carefully constructed that it looked, from the outside, like a painting. The school's front office called me when I was still in the elevator of our building, and the assistant's voice had that particular careful quality people use when they're trying not to say something alarming. "Mrs. Hargrove, Miss Vega just wants to speak with you directly. Please come to the main office when you arrive." I asked if Cade was all right. "He's fine. she said. "He's with the school counselor right now." The school counselor? A 7-year-old sitting with a school counselor at 10 in the morning because he grabbed the wrong tablet? When I walked through those school doors, 2 uniformed police officers were standing in the lobby, and one of them was watching for me. I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe they were there for something else entirely, maybe I was catastrophizing the way anxious mothers do when their kids are involved in anything involving an authority figure. I walked in and said my name to the front desk receptionist, and before she could respond, one of the officers stepped forward. "Mrs. Hargrove, I'm Officer Reyes, NYPD. We need you to come with us." Just like that. No preamble, no softening. The way you speak to someone when you already know something about their life that they don't know you know. I followed him down a hallway I had only ever walked cheerfully, past the artwork Cade's class had made in September, crowned suns and wobbly houses, and one that I recognized as Cade's, a drawing of our family, 4 figures, tall and short, in front of what was meant to be our building. I was put in a small room, beige walls, a round table, 2 chairs, the kind of room that exists in every institution for the purpose of delivering bad news. Officer Reyes sat across from me. A woman in plain clothes, Detective Solis, she told me, handing me a card, sat beside him. Between them on the table was Reeves' iPad in a clear evidence bag. "Mrs. Hargrove," Detective Solis said, "I want to be straightforward with you. Your son's teacher, Miss Vega, noticed the tablet wasn't the child's regular device when it was used during a classroom activity. The device was not password protected initially because it had been recently restarted. When Miss Vega attempted to find the child's name or a contact number, she accessed the photo library." She paused. "What she found required her to contact us immediately." The detective slid a printed screenshot across the table and said, "Do you recognize any of these people?" The photograph had been taken inside a room I recognized. The wallpaper, deep navy, geometric, custom designed by the interior decorator we had paid $40,000, was unmistakable. It was our master bedroom. The bed was our bed. The Egyptian cotton sheets were ours. And the woman in the photograph was not me. I want to describe what that moment felt like, but I have spent months trying to find the language, and the language keeps failing me. It is not like being punched. It is more like the floor becoming transparent, like suddenly seeing that what you thought was solid ground is actually nothing, has always been nothing, and you have been standing on air this entire time, sustained only by your own willingness to believe otherwise. The woman in the photograph was young, mid-20s, I would later learn, 24, and beautiful in the specific, polished way of someone who has been told their beauty is their most important feature. She had dark hair, long legs, and she was wearing what I recognized with a nauseating lurch as a shirt from Reeves' closet, his Columbia University shirt, the one I had washed 1,000 times. "There are more," Detective Solis said quietly, "many more. And there are other files on this device that are more serious. Mrs. Hargrove, I need to ask you directly, do you have any knowledge of your husband's activities outside the home?" I said no. My voice worked. I have no idea how. Because here's what I didn't say out loud. I had suspected something for 4 months. I had chosen not to look, and in that choice lived the most expensive ignorance of my life. I need to be honest with you about the 4 months leading up to that Tuesday, because the story doesn't work without it. The previous June, I had found a receipt, a hotel receipt, the kind that gets emailed to a shared account by accident, for the Lowell on East 63rd Street, a one-night stay, a Tuesday, midweek, when Reeve had told me he was in Boston for a partner retreat. The bill included dinner for 2, a bottle of Barolo that cost $400, and a room rate of $1,800 a night. I asked him about it. He said his assistant had booked it for a client who needed a room last minute and used the company card, and the confirmation had gone to Reeves' email by mistake. He was calm and specific and irritated in exactly the right measure, the irritation of a man whose competence has been questioned, not the guilt of someone caught. I believed him. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, and because our life was beautiful and our son was happy, and the alternative was a demolition I was not prepared to survive. The thing about being a former litigation attorney is that you know exactly how to build a case and you know exactly how to avoid building one when you don't want to know the verdict. I had spent 4 months being the opposing counsel of my own suspicion, objecting, overruling, suppressing evidence. Detective Solis gave me a moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Hargrove, the photographs are one issue, but there is something else on this device that is significantly more serious, and it is the reason we are involved beyond what would ordinarily be a domestic matter." She turned the iPad toward me, and what I saw on that screen had nothing to do with the woman in my bedroom. It was a spreadsheet, columns and rows, coded in abbreviations I didn't immediately understand, with numbers, large numbers, 7 and 8 figures, and dates going back 3 years. Alongside the spreadsheet were emails, forwarded to an encrypted address from Reeve's work account, and the emails were between Reeve and 2 men whose names I would come to know very well. The content of those emails, once Detective Solis walked me through them, described a financial arrangement so calculated and so criminal that it had apparently been under federal investigation for 14 months before my 7-year-old carried his father's tablet to second-grade show and tell. "Your husband's firm," Detective Solis said carefully, "has been the subject of a joint investigation by the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and the SEC. We have been waiting on specific documentation that, until today, we had not been able to access." She looked at me steadily. "Mrs. Hargrove, your husband did not forget his iPad this morning." I stared at her. "We believe this device was deliberately left accessible," she said. "We're still determining by whom and for what purpose." Someone wanted this iPad found, and the question that kept me up for the next 3 weeks was whether that someone was trying to destroy Reeve or me. I drove home in a car I barely remember ordering. I sat in the back seat on Franklin Street outside my building, and I looked up at the penthouse windows, and I thought about every conversation I had ever had in that apartment, every dinner party, every Sunday morning, every Christmas, every fight and reconciliation and ordinary Wednesday evening that had composed the texture of my marriage. I thought about Cade's drawing on the school hallway wall, the 4 figures in front of the building. 4, not 3. I had assumed the 4th was Paloma, but what if Cade knew something, the way children know things that adults never give them credit for? What if the 4th figure was someone else? I went upstairs. I did not call Reeve. I called my sister, Bertie, who lived in Chicago and who had disliked Reeve from the first time they met at Thanksgiving 6 years earlier and had never offered me a single "I told you so" in 6 years of biting her tongue. Bertie picked up on the second ring and said, "Dakota, what's wrong?" before I said a single word, because sisters always know. I told her everything in the elevator. I was still talking when I walked through the front door of the apartment and stopped dead in the entryway. The marble console where we kept the tablets was cleared off, completely empty. Every item, Reeve's extra keys, the small dish where I kept lip balm and hair ties, the stack of Cade's school mail, was gone. The surface was bare and wiped clean. And on the floor in front of the console was a single white card. No envelope. I told Bertie to stay on the line. I picked up the card. It said, in Reeve's handwriting, "I know you were there today. Don't come looking for me. There's more you don't know. Everything in the apartment is yours." Bertie was so quiet on the other end of the phone that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, very softly, "Dakota, listen to me. Do not touch anything else. Call your attorney right now." But I had been my own attorney once, and I hadn't lost a case in 5 years of practice. I stood in my 4,000 square foot apartment, on floors I had chosen, beneath light fixtures I had sourced from an artisan in Florence, surrounded by a life I had believed in completely, and I felt something shift inside me that I can only describe as the return of someone I used to be. The woman who had argued in front of federal judges at 31, the woman who had cross-examined witnesses until they cracked, the woman who had understood, instinctively and professionally, that the most powerful thing you can do in any situation is know more than the other person thinks you know. Reeve thought he had the upper hand. Reeve thought I was a kept woman, softened by 5 years of luxury, too comfortable to fight. He had watched me trade my briefcase for a Pilates schedule and apparently concluded that I had also traded my mind. He was about to find out exactly how wrong a brilliant man can be about a woman he underestimated. I walked through the apartment methodically, not panicking, not crying, not yet. I was saving the breakdown for later, for Birdie's guest bedroom in Lincoln Park, where I would spend 4 days eating her food and staring at her ceiling and letting myself feel the full weight of it. But not yet. Right now, I was looking. I went to Reeve's home office, the room he kept locked, which I had always respected because I believed married people were allowed their privacy, which is a beautiful principle that only works when both people deserve it. The door was unlocked. He'd left in a hurry and forgotten to lock it, or he didn't think it mattered anymore, or he wanted me to find what was inside. I still don't know which. The desk was cleared, the laptop was gone, but the bottom desk drawer, the deep one, file depth, was slightly open, the way drawers are when someone has pulled them out in a rush and pushed them back imprecisely. I pulled it fully open. Manila folders, labeled in Reeve's neat, tight handwriting. I pulled them out one by one. The second folder was labeled with a name I didn't recognize, and inside it was a photograph of a child I had never seen, a little boy, maybe 4 years old, dark-haired, round-faced, wearing a Yankees cap. And on the back of the photograph, in Reeve's handwriting, was a date, 18 months ago, and 3 words: first visit, healthy. I sat down on the floor of Reeve's office. I sat there for a long time. Then I took every single folder, put them in a tote bag from the closet, called the family law attorney I had quietly consulted twice in the past 4 months without ever scheduling a formal meeting, and told her I was ready. Ready for what? She asked. To burn it down, I said, legally and completely. My attorney's name was Priya Deshpande, and she was the kind of woman who wore Armani to depositions and kept a signed copy of The Art of War on her office bookshelf, not as decoration, but as a working document. She had a 94% win rate in high net worth divorce cases and a reputation among Manhattan's financial elite that made men like Reeve go pale. I had found her 8 months ago when I had started, quietly and without admitting it fully to myself, preparing for a possibility I couldn't yet name. I had never retained her. I had just wanted to know she existed. Now I called her at 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, and she answered on the first ring and said, "Dakota, tell me everything." I told her. She was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "He made a mistake. He left you in the apartment." I didn't understand what she meant at first. She explained, when a spouse vacates the marital home voluntarily, it changes the legal landscape considerably. Reeve had walked out. He'd left a note. He'd cleared his things, or some of them, and departed in a manner that suggested premeditation, which meant this was not a spontaneous act, which meant there was planning, which meant there was a lawyer on his side who had advised him, which meant there was a strategy I needed to understand and dismantle. But she also meant something simpler and more immediate. The apartment was mine. The physical space was mine. The walls that held the secrets were mine, and I was already inside them. That night, after Cade was home and had been told only that Daddy was away for work, which was not technically a lie, Reeve was very much working something, and after Paloma had made Cade's dinner and given him a bath and read him 2 chapters of his current book and tucked him in, I sat at the kitchen island with the manila folders before me and a glass of Sancerre I did not drink, and I read every single page. And by midnight, I understood that what had been done to me was not just a betrayal, it was a construction, a design, a years-long architecture of deception so precise that it required my cooperation, my willingness to be comfortable, to be trusting, to be grateful, to function. I had not been a wife. I had been a cover story. The photographs on the iPad were the least of it. The financial documents were the middle of it. The child in the folder, the boy with the Yankees cap and the date on the back, that was the heart of it. And there was one more thing in those folders that I had not yet fully processed, one piece of information that reconfigured everything I thought I knew, that answered a question I didn't know I'd been asking, that explained why Detective Solis had looked at me with something beyond professional concern, something that looked almost like pity. I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. I wasn't ready to put that particular piece of information into words because saying it would make it real, and real was a country I needed to enter on my own terms. What I will tell you is this. When I finally went to bed that night, I did not cry. I lay in my bed, our bed, the bed from the photograph, and I stared at the ceiling and I made a list in my mind. Not a list of grievances, a list of assets, what I knew, what I could prove, what was documented and time-stamped and irrefutable, what leverage I had and what leverage he thought he had, and what the delta was between those two things. Because here's what Reeve forgot about the woman he had married and then slowly, deliberately, systematically diminished. I was not the woman he had diminished. I was the woman who had let him think that. And those are 2 very different women, and only one of them was dangerous. Cade slept through the night, dreaming whatever 7-year-olds dream, dinosaurs and recess and oat milk pancakes. In the room next door, her mother lay awake until 4 in the morning, becoming someone Reeve Hargrove had never met. The woman who had packed a diaper bag and clipped coupons and attended school fundraisers and smiled at charity galas and said Reeve knows best at dinner parties was going to bed for the last time. When the sun came up over the Manhattan skyline, cold and clean and indifferent, Dakota Hargrove, former federal litigator, was already on her 2nd cup of coffee and her first call to a private forensic accountant whose firm had untangled 3 of the last decade's biggest Wall Street fraud cases. She was not a wife who had been cheated on, she was a litigator who had been deceived, and she knew the difference between the two better than anyone. One cries and moves on, the other builds a case. The question wasn't whether I would win. The question was how completely and how publicly, and whether Reeve Hargrove, the man who had kissed my face that morning like I was furniture he was fond of, would see it coming. He wouldn't. He never did. 3 weeks after I walked out of Cade's school with my whole life restructured and everything I thought I knew rearranged into something I no longer recognized, I was sitting in Priya's office on the 42nd floor of a building on Park Avenue, looking out at the city that had been my backdrop for 11 years, and I felt, for the first time since that Tuesday, something dangerously close to calm. Calm is different from peace. Calm is the eye of it. Calm is what happens when a woman who used to argue cases in federal court finally has enough information to stop reacting and start moving. Reeve Hargrove had been arrested 2 days earlier, not by NYPD, by the FBI. I want to say I was surprised. I want to tell you that the Friday morning call from Detective Solis, Mrs. Hargrove, I wanted you to hear this from us directly, knocked me sideways. But the truth is, I had known it was coming for 10 days. I had known because Priya and I had spent those 10 days doing something that Reeve, in his arrogance, had not anticipated, cooperating, fully and strategically cooperating with the federal investigation, turning over every document from those folders, every email I had discovered through 3 weeks of careful legal forensics, every account access I had rights to as his spouse. I had not destroyed him. I had handed them the shovel and said, very politely, "Here's where to dig." The charges were investment fraud, wire fraud, and securities manipulation, a scheme Reeve and his two partners had been running through a shell company registered in Delaware and funneled through accounts in the Caymans for 3 years, defrauding 27 investors of a combined $41 million. It was elegant in the way only financial crime can be elegant. Layers of abstraction, legitimate-looking paperwork, a real fund with real returns, obscuring a secondary operation that was entirely invented. Reeve had always been the smartest man in any room he entered. He had never once questioned whether that was enough. He had forgotten that I had also been the smartest person in every room I entered, until I stopped entering rooms that mattered. Let me tell you about the woman in my bedroom. Her name was Sienna Locke. She was 24, a graduate student in art history at Columbia, which explained the Columbia shirt, I suppose, a detail so casually cruel that I had to respect its audacity. She had been seeing Reeve for 14 months. I know this because she told me herself, not in a confrontation, not in a dramatic penthouse showdown. She emailed me 2 weeks after everything came out with a message that began, "Mrs. Hargrove, I know you have every reason to hate me, and I won't try to talk you out of it, but I think there are things you deserve to know, and I have been carrying them because I didn't know who else to tell." I almost deleted it. I almost deleted it 12 times. I read it at 2 in the morning in Bertie's guest bedroom in Lincoln Park, while Cade slept in the next room and the Chicago wind came off the lake and Bertie's old radiator ticked and knocked. I read it twice. Then I called Priya at 7 a.m. and forwarded it. Because Sienna Locke was not, as I had initially assumed, simply the other woman in the oldest story in the world. Sienna Locke was a witness. And witnesses, in my former profession, are the most valuable asset in any case. Sienna had not known Reeve was married, not for the first 4 months. This is the part that breaks differently when you hear it, not because it absolves her, but because of what it means about how Reeve operated. He had maintained a second identity for her, a second phone, a second address, an apartment in Morningside Heights paid through the same shell company that the FBI was now dismantling, a second biography in which he was a divorced man with joint custody of a son he saw on alternate weekends. He had kept this fiction running alongside our marriage with a discipline and attention to detail that professionally I could only describe as impressive, and personally made me feel like I had been living inside a documentary about my own life without knowing the cameras were rolling. Sienna found out the truth when the FBI contacted her as part of their investigation. She had walked into that conversation thinking she was being asked about her boyfriend, and walked out understanding she was the unwitting secondary domestic arrangement of a man who had a wife, a legitimate son, and, this is the part that requires a breath, another child entirely. The boy in the photograph, the Yankees cap, first visit, healthy. His name was Elliot. He was 4 years old. His mother was a woman named Britta Voss, and she had lived for 5 years believing that Reeve Hargrove was going to leave his wife for her. Britta Voss was 32, a pediatric nurse from Hoboken, and the most devastatingly ordinary detail about her was how reasonable she seemed when Priya and I finally met with her attorney. She had met Reeve at a hospital fundraiser. She had fallen for him over 6 months of dinners and promises. She had gotten pregnant, and Reeve had, to his credit, or perhaps just to his pragmatism, not disappeared. He had set up a trust fund for Elliot, paid Britta's rent, visited with the kind of systematic frequency that kept her hoping without ever delivering the thing she was actually waiting for. She had never told anyone who Elliot's father was. She had protected him. She had protected Reeve for 5 years because she believed the story he told her, which was a story about a loveless marriage to a cold, difficult woman, me, apparently. I was the cold, difficult woman in this version, and about a future they would eventually share. Did he ever mention me by name? I asked Britta's attorney, very quietly, during our meeting. The attorney glanced at Britta. Britta looked at her hands. Then she looked at me. "He called you D," she said. "He said you were unhappy no matter what he did, that you'd never really loved him, that you stayed for the lifestyle." She paused. "I'm sorry. I believe him less now than I did then." The coldest thing I have ever felt was hearing a stranger describe the fictional version of me that my husband had invented to excuse himself to women he was using. The second coldest thing was realizing I had helped him build her. Every time I softened my edges to keep the peace, every compromise I framed as generosity, every ambition I packed away, I had handed him the material. But I am getting ahead of myself, because the story isn't about Britta, and it isn't even really about Sienna. They were casualties of the same disaster I was. The story, the real story, the one that explains why I said I never went home again, is about what was underneath all of it. The layer below the affairs, below the fraud, below the parallel lives and the shell companies and the second apartment in Morningside Heights. The layer that Detective Solis had been hinting at in that beige room at Pemberton Academy. The thing she'd called more serious. The thing I had found in the folders that I hadn't been able to say out loud for 3 weeks. Reeve hadn't forgotten his iPad. I told you that already. Detective Solis had said they believed the device had been deliberately left accessible. But what I hadn't understood then, what I only came to understand after 3 weeks of forensic accounting and one very long call with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, was who had deliberately left it accessible. It wasn't Reeve who left the iPad where Cade would find it was me, and I hadn't known I was doing it. Let me explain. 8 months earlier, I had found a forensic IT company through a referral from a colleague of Priya's, a firm that specialized in digital evidence recovery for divorce proceedings. I had called them. I had had 2 consultations. I had then, in the particular denial spiral that had governed my life from June through October, never hired them and never told anyone I had called. But at our second consultation, the lead technician, a quiet woman named Okafor, had said something I had filed away without understanding. "Mrs. Hargrove, the most important thing in any digital evidence situation is access. If you can get physical access to the device, everything else is procedural." She had told me about the setting that auto-disables passcodes after a device restart. She had told me that this setting is often enabled on work devices that need to be accessible to IT teams. She had told me this purely informationally, as a professional, explaining how digital evidence works. And somewhere in the back of my mind, the part of my mind that had spent 5 years in courtrooms and knew how evidence worked, and never entirely stopped being a litigator even when she was packing Cade's lunches, that information had lodged. The night before the iPad appeared on the console, Reeve had left his iPad charging in the kitchen while he showered. I had picked it up. I had done what Okafor described. I had restarted the device, which would temporarily disable the passcode on restart due to a setting Reeve had enabled for work access. I had placed it on the console. I had told Paloma, in passing, that Cade's tablet was on the console for the morning. I had not consciously known what I was doing, or so I told myself for 3 weeks. And then one morning, drinking coffee in Bertie's kitchen in Lincoln Park, I understood that I had known exactly what I was doing. I had just not been ready to admit that I was capable of it. Here is what the conscious part of me had wanted: for someone else to find it, for the information to surface through a channel that didn't require me to be the one who went looking, because going looking would have meant admitting that I already knew what I would find, and I wasn't ready for that knowledge. I had engineered an accidental discovery because I didn't have the courage to make a deliberate one. My 7-year-old had been the instrument of my own subconscious intelligence, which means I owe Cade, in a way I can never fully explain to him, the rest of my life. I told Priya this, all of it. I told her about the consultation with Okafor, about the passcode reset, about what I had or hadn't known consciously. I needed her to understand the full picture before she built our case, and I needed to be honest with at least one person about the role I had played in my own rescue. Priya was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Dakota, what you did is not a crime. What you did is called survival instinct, and frankly, it's the most lawyerly thing I've ever heard a non-lawyer do." She paused. Now let's talk about the money. The money. The part that Reeve had been most confident I couldn't touch, because most of it had been moved before I had any reason to go looking for it. Here is where 5 years of being a litigation attorney, even in retirement, saves your life. I knew what forensic accountants looked for. I knew how asset dissipation works in high net worth divorces. I knew that money doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes real estate held in LLCs. It becomes art purchased at auction under a corporate name. It becomes loans to shell entities. I had spent 3 weeks while Reeve assumed I was falling apart in Manhattan, sitting with Priya's forensic accountant and walking him through every financial document I had memorized from those folders, every LLC, every transfer, every offshore account code. The FBI found $41 million in investor funds. What they did not have, but what I was able to provide, was documentation of an additional $11 million that Reeve had moved into a set of accounts that were not part of the investment operation, and therefore not immediately visible in the federal investigation. These were personal funds, accumulated through a combination of legitimate income and the systematic siphoning of our marital assets over 4 years. Money that should have been ours. Money that he had been quietly extracting and relocating in preparation for an exit he had been planning long before I found that hotel receipt. He had been planning to leave. Not with Sienna, who was a distraction, not with Britta, who was a complication. He was planning to leave alone, to a country without extradition, with $11 million, leaving me in a penthouse with a mortgage I didn't know had been restructured, and a husband who had apparently decided that the best severance package he could offer his family was disappearance. The FBI arrested him in a hotel in Miami, 3 days before a flight to the Maldives. He had a go bag, a new passport, not fraudulent, a legitimate second passport through a citizenship by investment program he had enrolled in 2 years ago, and a one-way ticket. When they told me this, I thought about the morning kiss. The thumb on the cheekbone, the eyes already somewhere else. He had been rehearsing goodbye for months, and I had interpreted it as distraction. Reeve's attorney attempted, in the first week after the arrest, to reach a plea arrangement that would have protected a portion of the marital assets, specifically the penthouse and a set of investment accounts, by arguing they predated the fraudulent operation. This is a standard move. Priya anticipated it. We had already filed for divorce on grounds of financial fraud and concealment, which in New York creates a specific legal pathway for asset recovery that the federal plea arrangement couldn't override. It was, Priya told me, like watching someone try to sandbag a flood they don't know has already reached the second floor. Reeve called me once from a federal holding facility through his attorney's phone. I took the call. He said, "Dakota, whatever you think of me, don't do this to Cade." I let him finish. Then I said, "You did this to Cade. On the morning you decided that your exit plan was more important than your son's father being a person worth having around. I'm not doing anything to Cade. I'm making sure he has something left." And I hung up. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. The settlement, combined with the asset recovery from the federal proceedings, in which I was designated a victim spouse and entitled to restitution, awarded me the penthouse, the investment accounts Reeve had attempted to protect, and a portion of the recovered offshore funds that fell under Maryville property law. The total was more than I will discuss publicly, but enough to educate Cade, fund the life I want to live, and endow a small legal aid organization I established for women navigating high-asset divorce without resources. I did not keep the penthouse. I sold it, $11.2 million, clean, the day the deed cleared. I took Cade to Chicago for 6 months, to Bertie's neighborhood, and I let him go to a public school where nobody's parents were hedge fund managers, and the lunch bags were paper, and he made a best friend named Tommy who lived above a Polish bakery and thought Cade's dinosaur knowledge was the coolest thing he'd ever encountered. Cade is 8 now. He is the most grounded child I know. He has no idea what he did that Tuesday in October, and someday, when he is old enough, I will tell him, "You carried a dinosaur backpack to school, and you accidentally saved your mother's life." Reeve pled guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of securities manipulation. He was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. He will be 54 when he gets out. The man who kissed my face like I was furniture he was fond of will be middle-aged and broke, and entirely without the architecture of status and wealth and charm that was the only self he ever really had. Sienna Locke finished her dissertation. I know this because she emailed me when she defended it. Brief and formal, no expectation of response. I sent back 2 words. Well done. I meant it. She had been lied to as thoroughly as I had been, in a different direction, and she had chosen honesty when she could have chosen silence. That counts. The world is short on people who choose honesty at personal cost. Britta Voss has sole custody of Elliot. Reeve signed over his parental rights as part of a separate civil agreement. He wanted the liability reduced, which is the most clarifying fact about his character I could possibly offer you. Elliot has Reeve's dark hair, and Britta told me in the one phone call we have ever had, an obsession with trains that she finds both delightful and exhausting. I hope he grows up to be a good man. I think he might. He has a grounded mother who protected him for 5 years at her own expense, and that kind of love tends to land. I went back to law, not to a firm, to myself. I passed the New York bar re-examination 11 months after the divorce was final, because the 5-year gap required recertification, and I scored in the 93rd percentile, which I mention not for vanity, but because I want you to understand what 5 years of lunch packing and charity galas and being the quiet wife at the corner of the dinner party table does not actually do to a woman's mind.
It does nothing. Your mind stays exactly what it was. It just waits. My practice focuses on family law and financial fraud. I represent women, primarily, in high-asset divorces where financial concealment is a factor, which is more common than anyone in those beautiful penthouses and beautiful marriages wants to admit. I am expensive, and I am not gentle, and I have a 91% win rate in 18 months of practice, which Priya says is annoyingly close to mine for someone who just came back. We have lunch every other Thursday. She orders the sea bass, I order the steak. We talk about cases, and we talk about Cade. And occasionally, we talk about the particular satisfaction of watching a man who thought he was untouchable discover exactly where the ceiling is. I am in a 1-bedroom apartment in the West Village now. It is small by the standards of my former life, and it is the most beautiful room I have ever lived in because every inch of it is exactly what I chose. The coffee is mine. The books are mine. The mornings are mine. Cade has his own room painted the specific shade of green he selected from a paint swatch for 45 minutes while I waited and did not once say, "Hurry up." There is a photograph on my desk. Not of Reeve, not of the life we had. It's a photograph of me from 11 years ago, the week before I met Reeve, standing on the steps of the federal courthouse on Pearl Street after winning my first major fraud case. I am 25 years old in the photograph. I am wearing a gray blazer, and I am laughing at something someone off camera said, and I look completely, unapologetically, terrifyingly alive. I keep it there because I need to see her every day, not as a reminder of what I lost, as a reminder that she was always in there the whole time, through the dinners and the galas, and the hand on the jaw and the eyes somewhere else, through every compromise I dressed up as contentment, through 4 months of a hotel receipt I chose not to examine. She was in there, waiting, doing the work, restarting iPads in the middle of the night without consciously knowing why. She never left. I just forgot to introduce her to people. Cade asked me recently. He asks me things now that land like small bombs, the way children's questions do. "Mom, are you happy?" We were making pancakes Sunday morning, and I was pouring batter, and he was very seriously arranging blueberries in a pattern on top, which he considers essential. I thought about the question the way I think about questions now, honestly, without performing, and I said, "Yeah, bud, I think I really am." He nodded, like this was data he had been collecting. Then he said, "Good, because you laugh different now." I asked him what he meant. He said, "Before you laughed like you were checking if it was okay. Now you just laugh." 7 years old. My God. I laughed different now. I just laugh.
The man who kissed my face like furniture is in federal prison in Cumberland, Maryland. The penthouse is someone else's backdrop for someone else's life. The marble console where two tablets sat side by side on a Tuesday morning is gone, sold with everything else, along with the Egyptian cotton sheets and the custom navy wallpaper and every physical artifact of the lie I had been living so gracefully. What remains is this: a one-bedroom apartment in the West Village, a green room, a legal practice with a 91% win rate, oat milk pancakes on Sunday mornings, a boy who notices how his mother laughs, and a woman who is done, completely, permanently, irrevocably done with loving people who require her smallness as a condition of their comfort. My name is Dakota Hargrove. I am 37 years old. I am the smartest person in the room again, and this time I plan to stay.
Take a moment to comment your city or country. I love connecting with you all. Thank you for listening and supporting, and be sure to subscribe for more stories. More are coming your way soon. Until next time, stay kind to yourself and stay strong.